game-adjusted rush percentage, which does not bode well for the running backs. But Sunday's road matchup against Houston is far too good for us to ignore, even with Harris's volume being way down in recent games. Consider this. Harris has faced the two toughest run defenses in the league over the last 2 weeks. The Bucs and Saints have stifled running backs to the tune of 2.7 and 3.1 yards per carry, respectively, and have allowed a combined 3 rushing touchdowns on the year. But in his first 2 weeks, Harris saw the league's 6th most carries against the Dolphins and the Jets. He's a massive 9.5-point favorite against the Texans team that's coughed up a league-high 8 rushing touchdowns and ranked 31st in run defense DVOA, according to Football Outsider. Davis Mills has been so ineffective, and the Texans can't generate anything on the ground, even though they'll always be playing from behind anyway, that Harris could easily get back to seeing 20-plus carries on Sunday. I had him as a must-sit in last week's video, but we're reversing course for Week 5. In the almost 3 weeks since Davis Mills has taken over, teams are averaging 36 rushing attempts per game against the Texans. That's good enough for me. Latavius Murray appears to be the clear lead back in Baltimore now. And wow, this could not have come at a better time for those of you who were dealing with injuries at running back or having to put up with plenty of disappointing seasons from guys we drafted in the middle rounds. Murray wasn't particularly efficient in Sunday's road win over Denver, but he handled 78% of Baltimore's running back carries and all 3 of the team's attempts inside the red zone, excluding one that went to Lamar Jackson. Not to mention, the Broncos have a top 5 run defense. Now, the Ravens are 7.5-point favorites against the Colts. They boast a 26.5-point implied total and have the highest game script adjusted rush percentage of any team in the league, essentially meaning they're running at the league's highest clip no matter the game situation. Sure, a lot of that has to do with Jackson's rushing volume, but the Ravens running backs are still averaging nearly 21 carries per game. And with Murray coming off a season-high 18 carries, there's real reason to believe he can do it again. Tyson Williams wasn't even active last week, so now Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell will be the only backs behind Murray for Week 5. Murray doesn't need to be in everyone's starting lineups, obviously, but he's a really good flex option or replacement start for anyone in need. And he has legitimate 2-touchdown upside in this offense, even if he won't be catching passes. I got to tell you about the most ridiculous promo we have going on and will probably ever run. Partnering with Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports to give you guys 2 free months, completely free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That includes all of the tools that we have to offer on the site, not just for football, but for every single sport. And all of these tools, of course, created by the #1 DFS player out there, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, who's won legitimately millions of dollars using these very tools. So go over, sign up at Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports using the link in the description, deposit $10 or more, and yeah, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the NFL on the Contrary, presented by Prize Picks. I'm Dave Lockram with you, as always, at about 22 and a half hours until, 23 and a half hours until we lock tomorrow for Week 5. Season's going quick already. And, well, as always, Alex Baker, back from the dead. No, actually, back from getting married. Took a little hiatus there, go away on the honeymoon. But finally, he returns to On the Contrary. What's up, brother? Glad to have you back.
What's up, man? It's good to be back. Like, you guys can't imagine the amount of FOMO there is when you have to miss a NFL main slate. So ready to get back at him.
Absolutely. And with us for, I think, the 3rd consecutive year. I love this guy. I've known him for a while. We worked together back when you didn't get paid to do DFS content in like 2014. I'm dead serious.
Yep.
Director of DFS over at 444 Fantasy, or 444 Football, sorry, and host of the DFS MVP podcast, TJ Hernandez. What's going on, man?
Gentlemen, what's up? Yeah, happy to be here as always. Alex, congrats on the run good with the real life. Hopefully we'll get some run good in the DFS streets. And Lofty, always good to see you, man. If I was doing this for free, you knew I had to parlay it into something, right?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, speaks for both of us. But also, if anyone's wondering, Matt Savoca and you do the DFS
man.
MVP podcast. Matt does.
Yeah.
Matt and I have been doing a show for the past couple of years together. The matchups breakdown on Thursday. He does a lot of other stuff. He's fantastic as well, man. So you got a great co-host over there.
Fantastic, super sharp dude. And then Jordan Vanek, I think you guys have been doing some stuff.
Yeah, we just brought Jordan on too.
He's doing some GPP stuff. So a lot of overlap between 4 for 4 and Awesemo, and hopefully both of our subs are going to get a lot of value out of that. So I'm stoked to have those guys around, and I'm stoked to be here with you guys. You guys are my pals too.
Absolutely. Follow TJ at TJ Hernandez on Twitter, Alex at Awesemo DFS, myself at Laffy _D, LOUGHY_D. Before, Alex, you know, we do this all the time to kick off every show. Before we get into the specific plays, matchups, you name it, we're going to hit on everything we can today in the next hour. And of course, a lot of just contrarian talk, more so game theory, game strategy. Tomorrow, it all culminates in a 4-hour live stream, right? So we'll break down every matchup. We'll have live before lock. We'll have a lot of game theory discussion with Alex or with Adam and Josh before we go live on the deeper dive. So we got you covered there. This one is a little bit more granular. But Alex, when we look at large field tournaments on this slate, 12 games, nothing crazy, no bye weeks yet, but we do have that London game. What is your approach or strategy going into something like this where, for the most part, ownership is pretty flat outside of a couple guys at the top?
Yeah, definitely. So playing just the plays that you like the most and not worrying quite as much about ownership is not a bad idea. We got a lot of awesome choices, and that's why it's kind of spread out. So it's all going to be putting together that perfect combo that combines some of those popular plays with some of the ones that people aren't thinking about as much.
Yeah, and TJ, you look at earlier weeks in the season where we've had like mega chalky games that in many cases didn't pan out. Dallas, LA comes to mind. Of course, if you had the running backs for Dallas, sure. But in terms of all out passing game stacks, that fell through. There were a number of them. Are there any games like that this week that we really have to look at and say, you know what, this could be a game to not fade entirely, but maybe look elsewhere to lower owned games just because ownership across these matchups is so flat?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things here. In those weeks before, it wasn't just like one game. We had multiple games.
Right.
That whereas if it wasn't the one game, there was 2 or 3 that we were going to as secondary. Here we have like Giants and Cowboys, and I think that will like the passing games in both of those are going to be popular. But if that one game goes awry, like Alex said, we could kind of just hit our best spots, right? So it's actually, I love these slates because we can really lean into our own reads and not worry about the ownership so much. And what we have going for us is that Giants Dallas game is late, and I think it's 125, not 105, because it's America's game of the week. So it gives us like an extra 20 minutes to late swap. If we whiffed on the early slate and that game's going to be super chalky, we can mass swap. If we're doing all right, we could stick to our guns on Dallas and New York, and then with the ownership thing, not only do we like not have to worry about it so much, like Alex said, because it's flat, but a lot of our ownership projections are going to be wrong, like not in an absolute sense, but in a relative sense, right? Because when everybody's packed so closely together, it's hard to figure out who's going to be the QB2 versus the QB5 in ownership. It could flip really easily. So that just lets us lean even more into our reads because we're not actually that confident in ownership projections when they're packed this closely together in a relative sense.
And for those of you wondering, and I learned this before the show, TJ does not know how to differentiate West Coast from East Coast time.
Come on.
So he meant 425 for all of you normal folk out there. But yeah, you're right. Enough. It's legitimately the last game on the slate, along with San Francisco and Arizona. All right, let's dive into some fun stuff here, fellas. And of course, for all of you that have joined us, welcome. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. And a big thank you for helping us crush that 60K mark last week. Already above 61,000 subscribers here on the channel. You make doing this shit pretty fun. So gracias in advance. And quick 100 thumbs up would be pretty nice out of the gate. I know that's going to be a little difficult to start, but hey, if you're hanging on a Saturday afternoon, or in TJ's case, Saturday morning, show us some love. All right, Alex.
Coffee.
What time did you get up today?
You want the true answer?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
About 30 minutes ago. I found the bar last night. So
yeah, that's all.
Friday night's my only free night, so I got to unwind a little bit.
I would hope so. And having that ability is fantastic. That's one thing I miss like crazy. Is just being like, hey, I'll get up when I get up. It is a beautiful thing. But Alex, there's one guy I just want to kick it off with, and we're going to get into some individual games as well. But there's one player that I really want to talk about, and that's Alvin Kamara, because it's such a mixed bag with him. And I think more to the negative, but he's seen 20 plus carries in 3 straight games, or 3 or 4 games this year. Only did that once in his 60 career games before this year. He's had back-to-back career high carries, but then last week, 0 targets and obviously receptions. Also, you're looking at more potential vultures by Taysom Hill at the goal line. Where do we turn with somebody like Alvin Kamara right now at a price point that's closely rivaling Derrick Henry?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting pivot away from Henry. He's a lot less exciting. I think everyone can agree as a play, aside from the ownership, with Derrick Henry just being on fire and having a great matchup. Matchup for Kamara isn't as good because Washington's defense is pretty solid. No, I do think that the workload has been pretty impressive, though. As you're mentioning, you got 26 carries last week, 24 2 weeks ago. And that's a great sign. Tony Jones, the backup running back, is on the IR at this point. So they called up this guy, Divine Ozigbo, to be the backup to Kamara. So I'm not expecting much workload change there. And I mean, he's maybe the guy that can have that ceiling that rivals Henry. So if everyone's going to Henry, I think it makes sense to take some shots on Kamara.
TJ, same question, different way of phrasing it. Do you think we can see Kamara get back to maybe not last year's pass catching volume? Obviously, he was the RB1 on the season by a mile, but just more balanced in terms of his workload and still seeing a lot of carries, but also getting more involved in the pass. And to be fair, he does have 2 receiving touchdowns this year, but you get the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of if you play best ball or redraft, all of our preseason concerns are kind of coming to fruition with Kamara. The only difference is that he's getting more carries than we expected, but the offense is just really vanilla. They're really trying to hide Jameis, which it isn't what you do with Jameis. You just need to let him rip it and hope that you get the good Jameis instead of the bad Jameis. But to answer your question about Kamara, I think it could balance out this week. I don't think it's going to balance out over the course of the season, because the one thing you can do against Washington, at least through the first couple of weeks, is throw against them. And that's exactly what the Saints don't want to do. They're trying to just run Kamara. So I don't think it's out of the question that Washington just sells out to stop Kamara on the ground. They're forced to throw to him a little bit, but I think that could actually spell disaster for the Saints, because they are obviously trying to hide Jameis. And I don't think that this Washington pass rush is as bad as they've been this year. They're one of the best in the league this year, one of the worst in the league last year. I'm sorry, one of the worst in the league this year. And I think that actually balances out. So yeah, maybe Kamara does get some more catches this week. But I think this is a really bad spot for the Saints in general. And to the note about pivoting off of Derrick Henry, like, I don't even know if we need to really be trying to price pivot this week, because it's so easy to flip the script on how we build lineups, because our 2 most popular players or 2 of the most popular players, the 2 most expensive guys, Henry and Adams, right? So if you don't have them in your lineup, you're going to have a unique build anyway. So why even try to pivot to Kamara, and what I don't think is a very good spot.
Let me stick with you for a second here, TJ, because before the show, we mentioned, or you mentioned that you like to talk about the Patriots offense a little bit. Mm-hmm. Patriots are likely going to be down 4 of 5 starting offensive linemen tomorrow. For those of you mathematically inclined people, that's 80% of the offensive line. I know a lot of people were low on Damian Harris because he's not a pass catching back, and his last 2 games, he only saw 10 combined carries. But to be fair, in positive or neutral game scripts, he saw, I think it was 23 and 16. And I don't think Bill Belichick's dumb. He's not going to try and run against the Saints or the Bucs.
Exactly.
Right. So and he was out there for 63% of snaps last week. So am I crazy to think that even with these problems that Harris could still a massive favorite on the road be in a quality spot at a discounted price point, or is that offensive line or other reasons pushing you somewhere else?
I mean, if we saw like huge line movement with all these injuries, I think I might be a little bit concerned. But the Texans are just so bad at everything that they do that I don't think it's going to matter much. Like you said, the Bill Belichick and the scheme and the skill players, I think can still win despite the offensive line concerns. It actually just cools me off a little bit. These injury concerns don't concern me with Harris as much as they do with the pass game, because it was that I was really liking that early in the week. And then as these injuries started piling up, I think it might hurt Jones's upside a little bit if they aren't letting him drop back and pass. But the Patriots don't really drop back and like throw deep anyway, right? They're going to try to move the ball on the ground and throw it short to Jacoby, throw it short to their tight end. So I think they'll still move the ball pretty well, and you're still going to get touchdown upside from the tight ends who I like a lot. And I don't know if Mac Jones is going to have the ceiling to like be a tournament guy that I'm targeting, but I think Damien's fine because of the great game script. And I love the tight ends this week because I think Jacoby is probably going to be more popular than he should be, even though the volume's there. Like they're just not using him near the goal line. They're using the tight end. So I actually don't like Jacoby that much this week, despite liking the Patriots.
It's a unique situation for this Patriots offense, Alex. How do you go about targeting them or staying away from them?
The Patriots are a really interesting case because last year they were probably the most run-heavy team with Cam Newton as quarterback. This year, they've been the most pass-heavy team with Mac Jones so far. They've only run the ball about 30% of the time in neutral game scripts over the first 4 games. So there's a lot of potential passing volume. Of course, they could get up big in the game. It's Houston. So then we'd see Damien Harris get the work. But I do feel like there's a lot of upside just from the volume alone. So that makes me look at Jacoby Myers. He's been getting a ton of targets, and the trouble is beyond that, it's like very spread out between Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Johnny Smith, and Hunter Henry. So I don't feel great about any of those as DFS plays. But I think that the stack has some potential.
All right. So, God, this team, Alex, the Detroit Lions are one that has caused some issues this season, but at the same time, they've been serviceable enough on offense to where opposing teams can beat up on them. They're 9.5-point dogs, 50.5-point total against Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson seems like a legitimate questionable. And outside of that, you've got DeAndre Swift, who saw fewer carries on the ground than Jamal Williams, but has the same on the season, almost 50%. And ran 32 routes to Williams 5 last week, and it seems to be the clear primary pass catching back now, even though Dan Campbell said he wants to use him more. Whatever. What are you doing with this Lions squad against Minnesota in a high total game where they're likely going to have to throw again?
Yeah, I think Hawkinson, it will depend a lot on if he plays or not. The trouble is, although the game total might be high, it's because Detroit is bad at defense and they're not very good at the offense. So they only have a team total of 20, which is maybe one of the higher ones they've seen, but nothing to get too excited about. And then the prices on the guys aren't really that great. Like Cephas would be the highest wide receiver, but he's 4,300 on DraftKings, 5,100 FanDuel. I think there's a lot better values this week. And Swift as well. I think it's interesting because like some of the games he's had bigger workloads, so there's a lot of volatility there. But the price, it just leads you to get guys that have more secure workloads at a cheaper price.
What do you expect from Swift this week, TJ? And how do you approach the Vikings with Dalvin Cook questionable, only 51% of snaps last week, but probably a hyper efficient passing game from Cousins, Jefferson, and Thielen?
Yeah, you asked me before the pod what games I wanted to touch on. I actually forgot that I loved this one a lot because the Minnesota side. And I mean, I don't like Swift. I think he's probably going to be in like maybe that 10 to 15% range just because there aren't a lot of running backs like that we're loving this week. So I think he's just like accidentally going to get a little bit of ownership. But yeah, like you said, the timeshare is rough. I guess like on DraftKings, you can make the argument that he could get the PPR points for you. But we also saw what his floor looks like, and it's not really good. But on the Vikings side, this is a team that a lot of people were targeting this game last week against the Browns Justin Jefferson scores. I think it was on the first drive. I think it was the first touchdown of the game. And then the game just turns into a complete dud. So now I haven't tweaked my ownership projections yet with news today, but their implied point total has moved up, tied for the highest on the slate with the Cowboys now. But I have them as the 9th passing offense in cumulative ownership. They're above average in neutral passing rate. Both teams are near the top of the league in plays per game. And the thing about Detroit's defense is they haven't faced a lot of passes because teams have been up on them. So their raw fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks looks really low, but they've allowed the most fantasy points per pass attempt if we exclude rushing on there. So the efficiency is super high. We know Cousins could be efficient with Jefferson and Thielen. So if with Dalvin straight up saying like he's not even healthy, if I can get Thielen, Jefferson, Cousins, whatever combo, all of those guys at or sub 10%, like this is a fantastic spot for them.
I love it. And I'll be the broken record again. Those passing numbers against would look a lot worse if Marquise Brown caught all of those touchdowns.
Yeah. RIP all my Lamar lineups that week.
I had so much Lamar, Marquise Brown skinny stacks everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could have been GPP winners, but as Savoca and I say every Thursday, like one or two plays can make all the difference when it comes to the NFL. So
you know what? That week's actually a really good example of what we talked about at the top with like not being sure what ownership's going to look like because it's so packed together. I think that was the week that Josh Allen went off and I thought he would be like uber chalk and he was like QB5, which was the difference between like 12% and 6%.
I think it was. Yeah. It's a good point. Alex, what do you do with a situation like this in the backfield? Because the passing game's nice here. Would I be surprised if Cousins went 175 for 4 touchdowns and was just insanely efficient? No, but what do you do where it's like, if Dalvin Cook were fully healthy, we'd probably have loads of Dalvin Cook. But now what type of concerns do we have that we see another 50-50 split or they get up early and just run Madison because he's actually a good backup?
I think we have to be really concerned about that because last week, obviously Cook was coming back from injury, but he only saw 9 rushing attempts to Madison's 10. So that does kind of indicate that if they get any chance to give him less carries, it might happen. So when you're comparing that to other guys in the same price range that could go for like 20 to 30 carries, that does make Cooks stand out as not being that exciting. But on the other hand, the matchup versus Detroit is about as good as it gets. So I wouldn't think he's crazy, but I think you might just be able to do more with that money.
How much do you like the passing game?
I think that Minnesota is always tricky because last year they were like very run heavy. This year they've been more like about league average. So I don't know exactly what to make of that yet. But it does concern me if I was going to stack up the team that Detroit would have to put up points for them to keep passing at a high rate. But that being said, I think that a couple of the players do stand out as good plays, like Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne. Osborne's kind of been surprising this year because in the past, Minnesota's run out mostly 2 wide receivers. But this year, Osborne's been out there a lot more. So he's been out there about 80% on dropbacks. And he's gotten targeted about an average amount of time. And he's really cheap this week. So he stands out. And then Jefferson and Thielen, always we got to take a close look at.
TJ, I don't want to spend too much time on this game. But the one thing I've noticed that's kind of interesting is that you look at them this year and I mean, last year they were definitely run heavy. Dalvin Cook was the RB2 at the end of the league, PPR leagues. But the crazy thing too is that Jefferson was the wide receiver 7 and Thielen was the wide receiver 10.
Yeah.
So this was a highly concentrated offense that saw Jefferson as a rookie, 26% target share, Thielen 24. They're not that far off the mark this year. So even if they are run heavy, is there still that avenue where you're like, all right, they still have 3 really great players on this team that when they pass, those 2 guys are going to make up 50% of the target share?
Yeah, there's definitely that. I think the only difference with them compared to like a Tyreek and a Kelsey is like, you're just never going to, I shouldn't say never, but I don't think you should be double stacking this team. Like it's one kind of like the Seahawks where they're similar too, right? With DK and Tyler Lockett, where they get so much of the target share, but you kind of just have to flip a coin each week and hope you get the right one. Or if you're playing MMA, you could toggle back and forth, but I don't think you should be doubling them. But maybe because Osborne's cheap, you can double with Osborne. But I think you can just kind of use him on your own too, if you want, not in a stack, just because he is cheap and unique. And I'm glad Alex brought him up, because in addition to what I said about Detroit, they've been specifically really bad against the slot, bottom 3 in yards per attempt to the slot. And people think Thielen's the slot guy there just because he has been so much of his career, but Osborne actually leads the team in slot targets by a pretty big margin.
If Dalvin Cook was fully healthy with no limitations, I would legitimately be considering running lineups with Dalvin Cook and Jefferson without Cousins, or Dalvin Cook and Thielen without Cousins. It worked. It won the Millie twice last year. Derrick Henry, AJ Brown without Tannehill won. In these type of smash spots, it's doable with a concentrated offense, but that Cook injury scares the shit out of me. So
that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's
that's a combo that we've been seeing in winning lineups. So whether you play Yahoo, FanDuel, or DraftKings, a running back with either his receiver or an opposing wide receiver is like one of the best mini correlations that we can use in tournaments, and it's popping up everywhere in big lineups.
Yeah, and you run those reports every week on Twitter too, which are pretty valuable stuff. Alex, I don't even know why I put this game in here, but I want to get your take, because sometimes you like these messy, disgusting games, right? And they end up hitting. The Denver Broncos and Pittsburgh Steelers have a 39-point total. Pittsburgh actually opened as a 1-point favorite. This swung through 0. Denver's now a 2-point favorite on the road. Teddy Bridgewater practiced, removed from concussion protocol, still questionable. Him and Melvin Gordon questionable, both expected to play. Cortland Sutton tweaked his ankle. I would have liked Sutton a lot more if he was playing and Drew Lock was starting, just because he's going to air it out to him on every attempt. But with how bad Pittsburgh's secondary has been, kind of like TJ was talking about Washington's secondary, that's where a lot gets funneled through. Are you going to have any interest in this game, specifically in the passing game for Denver, if Cortland Sutton is out, like a Tim Patrick or a Noah Fant or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty interested here. Bridgewater has been effective on the year, averaging 8 yards per attempt, well above the league average. And when you have Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler out, that opens up some opportunities for other guys. Also, Albert O is out. So that makes me think that Tim Patrick is a really safe bet to get most of the playing time. Cortland Sutton as well. Looks like a strong play, and Fant. So I think you can do some damage with the Denver guys. And Pittsburgh is always one of my favorite teams to pick receivers from, because the rate that Pittsburgh throws at is always one of the highest in the league, and it hasn't budged this year. So I think you got Claypool, Johnson, and Smith-Schuster that all stand out as great options.
What about you for this one, TJ, despite the low total?
I like pass catchers as one-offs from these types of games, because they're games that people just completely ignore. And Cortland Sutton is a guy that popped in 4-for-4's wide receiver breakout model this week, just because he has been getting so much usage, but hasn't matched that like what 159 one line or whatever it was from week 1. But the air yards.
You think he'll play?
No, I was saying that I would have liked him a lot.
My fault.
Yeah. But now I kind of agree with Alex on Tim Patrick, because he was popping in usage as well. But I really love Noah Fant as the one-off in this game, because he's getting like that elite tier usage, and his price hasn't quite climbed to the elite tier yet. He's still 4,900, so it's like expensive-ish. But like I talked about at the beginning of the show, just kind of flipping that build on its head. I think people are going to go. It's hard to get to Waller on DK, but they'll definitely be on him on FanDuel. But like Waller, Hawker, all the way down to like Evan Ingram, and no offense, like right in the middle of that pricing tier. So it kind of helps you start flipping the build of what some of the traditional salary allocations will be. And with Teddy, I mean, he has been pushing it down the field more than we've seen in the past, and he's been super efficient this year. Obviously, last week notwithstanding, with him getting concussed before the half, but before that, this offense has kind of been pumping, and they keep getting the injury bug. But Fant's getting consistent usage, and when we have these weeks where, I mean, there's Kittle's doubtful. I don't know if he's completely out yet, and then there's really just Waller as an elite tight end. So there's going to be popular tight ends, but tight ends always messy, right? So why not go low owned when you can?
Yeah, I like Noah Fant quite a bit here. I mean, the Steelers' run defense has still produced or has still played, relatively well compared to that secondary. Noah Fant could be in a great spot. And the truth is, Teddy Bridgewater has been airing it out too. Like his deep ball percentage this year, last year it was much higher than it was when he started 6 games for New Orleans, because when you have Mike Davis, there's zero need. Mike Davis and Alvin Kamara, why are you going to throw deep? No point. Let them do the work.
Mike Thomas.
But this year, you're seeing him really expand the playbook for them, expand the playbook for him. And that's encouraging with a guy like Fant, who's just good. TJ, let me stick with you and then get Alex's opinion on this next one. More of a game, just of a strategy thing, game theory here. With Miami getting 10 points in Tampa Bay, 47.5 point total, and obviously Jacoby Brissett getting a start with Tua out, how do you game stack something like this, or do you, when you've got a ton of great options for Tampa Bay, Gronkowski being out, of course, but still a lot of great options, Leonard Fournette getting a lot of ownership at the running back position, and then Miami, no Will Fuller, but you've got a lot of question marks, even though Tampa Bay's secondary hasn't been good.
I mean, this could be my ultimate eat crow spot of the week, because I think the Tampa Bay is just a really good spot to fade completely. I'm not taking Lenny Chalk when we've seen this happen so many times. Like, he hasn't seen 20 plus touches in a regular season game since December of 2019. I know they ran him out there over the playoffs and used him like workhorse down the stretch. But I mean, this is a team that they're going to want to pass a ton. They have a ton of weapons, and it's a team where another running back could steal a touchdown. Brady can throw for 3 or 4, and they all go to different players. So I actually kind of like fading this game as a whole. We have a really nice pivot off of Leonard Fournette to Damian Williams. If you want to do that, their prices are pretty close. And Fournette's ownership is probably going to be about double. So this is actually a spot where I'm fine like playing Waddle or Gesicki if you want like leverage. I don't know if it's leverage against that game, against that passing offense, because they might get a little ownership. But I think with Devontae Parker questionable, or guess what did they say? A possible game time decision, which by definition isn't that game time decision. And Will Fuller being out, Gesicki and Waddle could get a ton of targets if and when they do fall behind. So I actually just like a one-off from Miami and not even touching Tampa Bay.
Alex, we've seen this last year. No one in Tampa had a target share above 18.8%, I think it was. This year, no one has a 20% target share either. Now, it's a super efficient offense, which is good, so it mitigates some of that, and they throw a lot. But are you with TJ, or is this a spot where you'd rather just spray at a ton of Tampa Bay Bucks and hope that you hit on them in the right lineups when you're playing 150 of them?
I'm happy to take some chances on some Bucks. Now, Fournette is the most popular one, and it's because he's really cheap and he's been getting a ton of the workload, a lot higher than we were anticipating so far this year. Part of that last week was due to Giovanni Bernard being inactive. So from what I understand, Bernard is healthy. That will take Fournette's routes down to what it was the first 3 games, most likely. But that will be something I'm like, keep an eye out for, is if Bernard is inactive again. I think that boosts Fournette a decent amount. With the pass catchers, it's hard to really distinguish a ton between Evans, Godwin, and Brown. Brown's kind of the chalky one this week because he's cheap again, but I think they're all good. The main thing with Tampa I'm looking at is they just pass the ball a lot even when they're up. So I have them projected to pass about 40% of the time when they're leading. It's only when they have the game locked up that they really run the ball a ton. So that does make me consider going with some of these guys without Miami run backs, just because there's not a ton I'm loving on Miami.
What do you guys have Brait's ownership projection as? Do you have it in front of you by any chance?
I do. 4.2% right now.
Yeah, so I mean he's like a perfect pivot off of Ingram, who's going to be mega chalk, right? So that's that is an interesting play on the Tampa side, I think.
Yeah, he's cheap too. And he's seen 11 targets over his last 2 games. You can deal with that. Someone that they've looked to in the red zone or in the end zone, really, over the past few years. I don't have an issue with that. I mean, look, we know Tampa Bay is going to score points. It's just a matter of, like, TJ, the way you're playing this is saying, hey, I know they're going to score,
Yeah.
but it's also possible that Evans has 1 and 5 for 60 and Godwin has 1 and 4 for 80 or something like that, which in large field tournaments, even smaller ones these days, isn't going to get the job done. That's kind of the way you're viewing this, right?
Yeah, because other teams are going to score too, right? So when we can get low on Jefferson with concentrated targets, when we can get whatever you want to do with Arizona, we've got to a couple other games. I mean, Tennessee has a decent total. When you could get like concentrated points other spots at low ownership, like why even mess with it? I mean, there's obviously upside, but I think it's a pretty good spot to stay away from.
So Alex, one spot that I was staring at this morning when I was making this run sheet for us was Philly and Carolina, because the ownership projections on Philly right now are really, really low. I mean, I'm talking the highest projected owned is Eagles defense because they're so cheap. Outside of that, and we did get our update, Jalen Hurts came up a little bit, but he's at 5%. He has been, where's he at? Maybe one of you guys knows this without me looking it up, but he's got to be top 5 in fantasy points this year, right? He's fifth. He's fifth. He's 2 points. He's 1 point behind Brady for 4th. That's how good he's been. And Devonta Smith as a rookie, sure, you're going to have up and down games, but he's proven that he can create insane separation. And I think the big games are coming. Meanwhile, guys like Ertz has 15 targets over the last 2 games. Look, I'm not saying I'm in love with any of these guys, but I guess the question to you would be at this ownership, and I think all pretty palatable salaries, and JC Horn being out for Carolina, which has proven to have a pretty big effect on that defense. Are you looking to get to maybe Philly as a stack or this as a game stack, Alex? And then same thing to you afterwards, TJ.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Hurts, as you mentioned, is a terrific fantasy player. So he stands out as a decent option. And the surprising thing about Philadelphia is they have been passing the ball like even more than last year, which switching to Hurts, you would think they'd pass less, but that hasn't been the case so far. The one tricky thing with Philadelphia is once you go beyond Devonta Smith, none of them have like really secure, like high playing time. Goddard, Ertz, Watkins, they're all in the 50 to 60% of snaps range, running routes. Rager's at 75%. So it becomes a situation where there's not a ton of value going to any one guy. So that makes it really tough to pinpoint who to play. So I think you can probably find better options in other teams.
What about like a skinny stack here with Hurts and Devonta Smith, as we were kind of talking about with Lamar and Marquise Brown earlier, TJ?
Actually, I like a really like contrarian skinny build. I think Hurts with like a DJ Moore bring back, because Hurts is like the anti Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady can throw you 4 and not win a week because he doesn't run. Hurts can throw you two different guys and win you the week because he might run for 100 and score twice on the ground. And I think DJ Moore is actually like good chalk because he's getting Devontae Adams type usage at a $700 discount on DK. So this is like one of those games where there's always kind of a game every week where you're doing your research and one just doesn't pop to you for any reason. This has been that game for me, but I mean, I think Hurts naked or Hurts DJ Moore bring back is actually really interesting.
What about on the other side? You already talked about DJ Moore, but Christian McCaffrey, doubtful. Chuba Hubbard is obviously someone that's gotten a lot of talk this week. How much do you worry, though, in the passing game, seeing that last week against, what was it, Dallas, right? They got smoked against Dallas. That Rodney Smith was actually getting a lot of the passing downs and running most of the routes.
Yeah, and everyone outside of DJ Moore really has been kind of unpredictable. So it's just an offense that I just haven't really been targeting at all, and probably won't be targeting this week because of what you said. And I don't is Chuba even that cheap this week? I don't have his salary in front of me.
I don't think so.
But I don't think.
Pricey.
Yeah, so I mean, it's you're not even getting the discount on him anymore. So I don't have like any strong lean to want to play him, especially when you got like who's at the same price. James Robinson's actually getting the work, and is like a leverage play off of Henry in the same game. So I don't see why I would play Chuba at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think DraftKings learned their mistake after the Boston Scott. Remember Boston Scott chalk, and he completely flopped.
Yeah,
but they did that a couple times, Alex. I think even with Madison once too, where he just had him at minimum salary. So now they just preemptively price up all of these backup running backs behind bell cows to like $6,000, and that's what you're getting with Chuba Hubbard today, even last week as well. But your thoughts on the Carolina side of this one, Alex? DJ Moore, Anderson's been, I mean, just a ghost for most of the season. What are you doing here, if anything?
So I'm really considering the Carolina stack this week. And the reason why is on our top stacks tool, we have Darnold at 4.5% ownership, and the team has an 8.5% chance of being the top stack.
Wow.
So that's incredible leverage. Christian McCaffrey being out actually kind of helps because that's just going to make more targets for DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Those are really the two guys I'd look at in the stack. And since Darnold isn't overly popular, I don't mind just only having two options to go with. Robbie Anderson, yeah, he hasn't gotten targeted a lot this year. I'm kind of throwing last year's stats out the window for this team too because of the quarterback change. So I'm really hoping that McCaffrey being out gives him just a little bit more target share and makes him in the playable territory.
Okay. Now, pivoting to a spot, TJ, where I don't know if a ton of people are talking about this. I'm sure you guys have thought and talked about it this week, though. Devontae Adams is getting insane ownership. It's not crazy. 20% on a 12-game slate. It's not out of control, but it is the highest. Green Bay in our top stack tool, awesemo.com/join, by the way, if you want to get access to all these tools, built by the number one ranked DFS player out there. He's sitting right next to us, virtually, of course, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Want a decent amount of money using these tools: top stack, boom, bust, ownership, lineup builder, all the premium stuff behind the paywall for all sports, not just NFL. Use the promo code On the Contrary, get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum, all sports, everything. And you get that Fantasy Cruncher add-on if you want as well. On the Contrary, all one word, all caps. But anyway, TJ, Green Bay has the second highest top stack probability, almost 10%, highest leverage score. But no one's really talking about Aaron Jones. Could this be one of those spots, and we've seen him do it way too many times in the past, right? Way too many times at like 5% ownership, where Aaron Jones ends up being the guy with the 2 rushing touchdowns, a receiving touchdown, and 160 total yards.
Yeah, it could easily happen, and it is going to be. I think my only concern is that, like, because we're talking about it right now, and I think a couple people might be talking about it by tomorrow, is like he accidentally gets up to like 15-16%.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure if it happens, but I could see it happening just because it's not like a fantastic running back slate. If people don't play Henry, they're going to be like, where do I spend my money at? So I think it could maybe like get a little more steam than we expect. But no, I love the spot. And it is actually one of the spots I talked about, like kind of flipping the build on its head. I don't mind like eating the chalk on a Rodgers Devontae stack. I think it obviously has a ton of upside. You're just gonna have to be contrarian somewhere else. That's not hard to do. Like we could have chalky stacks, but again, it's not a spot where like I'm doubling or anything like that. But I'll definitely be using Aaron Jones as that leverage play and hoping he's like stays around 10ish or something like that.
Heinous one. I don't know if that's how he pronounces it or just misspelled, or it's something that I'm egregiously mispronouncing, but you know who you are. Said in chat, Alex, because I've got Jones Adams lineups with no Rodgers. Is that viable to you? And are Jones Adams with Rodgers expensive, but lineups viable to you given his pass catching upside? Curious on your thoughts here.
Well, I think that Jones and Adams together without Rodgers is fine. Because if you put Rodgers in there, that just like takes up so much salary that it's easy to see that he might have a good week, but just not being the optimal because you can't afford the guys you need.
Right.
So for that reason, I think it's okay. It's not something I don't want to force in my lineup, but if it happened, I'd be okay with it. I think, this seems tough to stack because it's so expensive to get Rodgers and Adams in your lineup. And then you're going to have a very similar build to other people, even though Rodgers, we're not projecting for a huge ownership. But the potential is also very good. So we have them as about a 9% chance of being the top stack this week, second on the slate. And it's hard to argue with that.
TJ, we had a question in chat from Carlos. one of our loyal viewers here. He says, "Yo, TJ, what kind of hat is that?"
Oh, nice question. Oakland Oaks. I grew up in the Bay, and I'm a big A's fan, but I'm always repping East Bay, Oakland side. Oakland Oaks was a team in Oakland in the '50s. They're actually a Yankees minor league affiliate, but shout out to Oakland.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was like a knockoff Rams hat where they accidentally did it upside down. I like it though; it's a nice looking hat. I didn't know what it was either. Thought about asking the same question. So thanks, Carlos. A lot of people in chat though liking Aaron Jones, which TJ might speak to what you were saying. Like right now we have him around 6%.
Oh really?
But I see it's definitely possible when a team is this good and you know that they can. When you know that they like no Marquez Valdes-Scantling, not to say that's a big deal, but no one in the right mind's expecting another pair of touchdowns from Randall Cobb, which kind of just leads you back to the Devontae Adams and the Aaron Jones.
I will just say I've just noticed. I mean, I'm doing ownership projections at 4 for 4, so I try to look at these things as close as possible every week and review them. And I've had just a lot more surprises in ownership this year than years past. Again, not in an absolute sense, but just in that relative sense where I thought a guy was going to be the RB10 in ownership, he ends up being the RB3 or something like that, just because the difference between 7 and 12% right now is a huge difference when everybody's packed so tightly together.
All right, Alex, are you stacking this game too on the other side with T. Higgins returning, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd coming off a big game, and Joe Mixon, according to Zach Taylor, for anyone wondering, said he should play, but in some capacity, which just, I mean, that's the last thing you want to hear from a coach.
Yeah, so I think if Mixon were out, that'd make me really want to stack this team up because I don't feel like they have as much confidence in the other running backs on the team. But with Mixon playing, I think he's an interesting play individually because he does get such a high workload. It'll be really important to keep an eye on what people are saying that are close to the team about what that will look like. Because if there's more concern about the workload, it could be worth swapping off. But it's always tricky to read the tea leaves because everyone coming back from injury, they're always like he might be limited, but then whether or not it materializes is another issue. Now with the stack, Cincinnati has been a decent team to stack because they pass at a reasonable rate and they're a big underdog in this game. So I think that that you could see Joe Burrow have to throw it a lot. So I think that Boyd, Higgins, and Chase are all pretty even to me, all out there like most of the plays, and I'm going to mix and match those guys, especially if I'm doing a game stack here.
Same thing to you here, TJ. This team has seen a lot less passing volume this year, but a lot of it's just been game script based, I think. So in a spot like this, do you look to kind of mix and match some Cincinnati pass catchers?
Yeah, so I'll actually take it a step further, and I didn't want to jump the gun on when you asked me about Aaron Jones, but if we do think Aaron Jones starts getting a little more popular than we expect, I think a really nice way to leverage Devontae is to bring back Devontae with something like a Burrow and a Jamar, and then bring it back because I'm actually more interested in T. Higgins being active than Joe Mixon being limited, because I think with all three of their best pass catchers playing, and then Joe Mixon in this limited capacity, they can be throwing a lot more, like Alex said. And I actually like having the cheaper Burrow and Jamar, and then bringing it back with Devontae and just having leverage that way. So, I mean, you can play T Higgins or Tyler Boyd with him if you want, but we've just already seen the upside from Jamar, using him in high leverage spots, using him end zone targets, deep targets. So I like stacking their side all the way.
Okay, awesome. We're going to talk Tennessee, Jacksonville. I'm going to ask you guys about Nick Chubb going up against this LA run defense. I know, touchy subject. San Francisco, Arizona, and a couple of other ones. Of course, the New York Giants. We got a little bit of time here, so we'll try and get through them quickly. But before we do, if you haven't checked out Prize Picks yet, I know a lot of you guys have and thoroughly enjoy it over there. I see people talking about it in chat, on Twitter all the time that watch this show. First of all, use the promo code. Get this out of the way first. Use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, for up to $100 first match deposit bonus when you sign up. Okay. You have no sharks over there, no optimizers, no mass entries. It's daily prop based contest. All you're doing is picking the over or the under, right? And you're making 2, 3, 4, or 5 player lineups. If a correctly picked 5-player lineup can net you up to 10 extra entry fees. Good stuff. And if you know a bunch of sports, maybe baseball, basketball as well. You can do the cross sport entries. You don't have to do 5, all of them for basketball, all of them for football. You got esports and a bunch of other stuff over there as well. So download the app or on the App Store or Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com, wherever you want. It looks great. It's super simple to use. And all of the process, the research, the shows that you've watched throughout the week, all of the bets that you're placing elsewhere, all of that knowledge and insight and research can be applied over to Prize Picks. So you're not taking additional time out of your day to make these picks, to build these lineups. Use the promo code Awesemo, get up to $100 first match deposit bonus, and check that out. Oh, and we have free NFL and MLB player prop tools to help you make those selections. I'll give you a weak spot here. Maybe they'll fix this, but you can go to rushing touchdowns, okay, and receiving touchdowns, but generally rushing touchdowns. And there's no line here. It's just over under a half a touchdown for these guys. Go and look at what other books are doing, because some weeks, like Eckler, we nailed that the other week. He was minus 160 to score. Some weeks you're going to get some really good ones. And this week, Ezekiel Elliott, minus 145 anytime score. Well, if you hit the over on that half a touchdown, you're not betting it with juice. You're just betting over half a touchdown. Take advantage of that type of stuff. Pay attention to it each week. Use the promo code Awesemo over at Prize Picks. All right, TJ, let me ask you about Nick Chubb here.
Yeah.
Chargers have been gutted in the run game, but they still have a solid defense, and people aren't exactly happy about Kareem Hunt's usage at the goal line. Could this be a week where we go to Chubb, or are you just off of this entirely, given the lack of pass catching and the uncertainty down close to the goal line?
I'm just like, I'm always willing to be wrong on Chubb. If he's in the winning lineup and I don't have him, like that's a player that, you know, it is what it is. Cause I'm never down to trust the usage there. And I think the Chargers have been gutted in the run game because they let themselves be gutted in the run game. Like we see them play back. They keep everything in front of them. That's why CEH chalk went off a couple weeks ago against them. And I think they're fine getting beat that way. The problem is this week that Baker can't throw because he has a torn shoulder labrum thing going on. So I think the Chargers might say, all right, we're going to flip the script on you guys, and we're going to take away Chubb and try to let's see what Baker can do with that bad arm. And I think Chubb can actually end up having a really bad game because of it.
To be fair, though, it's not his throwing shoulder.
Okay.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. It probably still hurts like a bitch, you know?
Yeah.
And he didn't look very good last week either,
Yeah.
But I don't know. You could absolutely be right. Plus, they want to run anyway, and the Chargers might just key in on that. What about you, Alex?
I'm off of the Browns here. I think that, I mean, Chubb and Hunt are both good players, but the price you're paying for Chubb is quite high. So I think for 7K, you're going to need like in the mid 20s points. So that'd be like 2 touchdown game, which is pretty unlikely for Chubb. So that makes me really want to look elsewhere. And then for the receivers, Odell Beckham's in the 6Ks as well. He hasn't been good in a while, so I don't see much reason to go here.
TJ, can you unroll this Tennessee team for me going into week 5 against Jacksonville as 4.5-point favorites with AJ Brown and without Julio Jones?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically just going to come down to like, are you going to eat the chalk on Derrick Henry or not? AJ Brown's kind of the wide receiver version of Aaron Jones this week, in terms that I think people are going to think they're being sneaky by leveraging against Derrick Henry by playing AJ Brown, and then he actually gets up to like 15% or something like that. So I'm kind of cold on this offense this week as a whole, just because of those two things. And I really like the idea, like I've talked about so many times already today, of just kind of flipping the script on the build and not having the 2 most expensive, most popular players in my lineup, because it gets you unique in salary, gets you unique in ownership really fast. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. Not necessarily from like, I think Henry's going to have a bad game, but if he doesn't go for whatever his 250 and 3 or whatever at that salary, then you're probably going to be okay. Like we saw it, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because we saw it last week or the week before. Tyreek went off for 50 points and wasn't even in the winning Millie lineup because of how crazy salary is right now. And it's similar with Henry now.
No question. Jair Alexander, by the way, just placed on the IR. So
yeah. I forgot to bring that up.
Take that for what it's worth. Just placed on the IR. Alex, Are you on Henry? Are you on Julio this week? Are you on Jeremy 12 target McNichols? I mean, that was wild. But in all seriousness, is this Tennessee Jacksonville one that you like a lot on both sides, one side, no side?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Henry is a great play, if not for the ownership. I mean, everyone wants to play him. He was 30% last week in a good matchup. He produced, so I have to believe that his ownership will be the same, if not higher, this week versus Jacksonville, who's a very weak defense. So I think, I mean, the only thing about him is the odds that he outscores every other expensive player aren't nearly as good as his odds of having a good game. So that's really what I'm going for. Is I feel like there's other guys that have great potential in that same price range that aren't going to have quite as much buzz. So I don't mind leaving Henry out of my lineup, but if I make some lineups and Derrick Henry is in them, I'm not going to be upset about that.
Yeah. If you're playing 150, you're going to use them, right? But if you're playing single entry or 3 max, you can get leverage really quick by not playing them.
For sure. Dude, on the other side of this one, TJ, I kind of like the Visca Chenault this week.
Give me all the Visca.
What's that?
I said, give me all the Visca.
I know. Dude, first of all, this Titans defense has not been particularly impressive, right? And it's not like they faced absolute murderer's row of matchups. You get Zach Wilson. Who'd they have before that? Was it Carson Wentz? I mean, I forget, but they've had some matchups that were really not all that imposing. The Jets, the Colts, Seattle, sure, and Arizona, but all in all, they just haven't been good, and they've been carved up a lot. So Laviska Shenault saw almost as many air yards in week 4 as he did in weeks 1 through 3 combined. They actually looked to expand his role and use him downfield, which we've all been clamoring for. All it took was a first play DJ Shark broken ankle to get him that. And it's unfortunate, of course, but can we see more of that in week 5? Because if so, Shenault could be a great play.
Yeah, for sure. Because like James Robinson is capable enough to take over some of the deep targets that Shenault was, or the shallow targets that Shenault was seeing. So I think they can be fine running them against Tennessee. And like you said, that Jets game kind of did it for me and convincing me that the Titans are just really, really bad. They've allowed the most deep balls in the league. They've allowed the second most yards per attempt to players lined up in the slot, where Visca's seen 18 of his targets. And I like these spots a lot where we talk about like a guy should be priced this and he's not. That's why we like him. I think Visca should be like a 25-30% owned guy, but because we have Waddle at the same exact salary and then Darnell Mooney to a lesser extent, I think they're all going to kind of eat into each other's a little bit. We might see Visca like 15 or 16 instead of 25 or 30, where I think he should be in terms of ownership percentage.
Alex, we had a question in chat saying, hey, if everyone's on Laviska Shenault, can we pivot to Marvin Jones? We only have a few minutes here, so we'll get to a couple more things, but I figured that's a pretty decent question coming into this game that could be pretty high scoring.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, okay, so Marvin Jones he's a good, he's been good this year, been targeted 20% of the time. He's out there more than 90% of dropbacks. The price has climbed a little bit. So I think he's playable, and Laviska Shenault in our ownership projections is the 4th highest owned player. So
what do you guys have him at? What
we have him at 16% on DraftKings. So I think he'll be very popular this week. So I like the idea of trying to pivot. Marvin Jones is a decent one. The other guy I'm looking at is Tavon Austin. He ran routes on 75% of plays last week. So it is clear that in last game he was the fill-in for Shark. He's the minimum price basically. So with a lot of expensive guys to play this week, Tavon Austin could be interesting. I'm definitely going to try to scour the beat writers' reports to make sure that he'll still have that role this week. And then James Robinson is also kind of intriguing. I'm not thinking the workload will be quite as good with Carlos Hyde expected to come back, but in games 2 and 3 where Hyde was active, it was a pretty solid workload. So I think he's intriguing because if Robinson has a big game, it might be more likely Henry has a weaker performance. And a lot of lineups are going to have Henry this week.
All right. So we got about 530 plus people watching right now. Appreciate you hanging out with us. We're up against it. So we're going to hit on one last game. I think it's an important one. But before we do, hit that thumbs up. Help us get to that 200 mark. If you haven't done so, it only takes a second, right? And subscribe to the channel. As you know, we'll gladly refund your misery if you hate it here. You wake up in cold sweats, regretting the decision. Just click unsubscribe. I don't think you'll want to, but it's a very easy, reversible decision. We'd love to have you hang out with us every day, though. And, of course, come in and hit that thumbs up. All right, TJ, sorry, but I don't think we can get to Chicago, Las Vegas. I know.
Oh, good. I'll just say play Damian and Ruggs. That's all I'll say.
Love it. Okay, yeah. Perfect. See, succinct. That's what I'm looking for. Because we have to quickly hit on San Francisco and Arizona. Trey Lance is starting. George Kittle's doubtful. Chase Edmonds is questionable. And DeAndre Hopkins has been less than stellar through the first few weeks. So, TJ, you first. Alex, you close it out. How do we tackle this Arizona-San Francisco game right now?
Yeah, I'll go quick. Lance going to be pretty chalky. It's really hard to get to expensive quarterbacks on DK, so it drives their ownership down. I love stacking Kyler with Nuke just because it's a loan stack that can go crazy, and people are scared of Nuke right now. And his ownership and salary reflects it. He's a little cheaper than he should be when he was when he was elite. So I like stacking that side of it a lot.
Okay. Alex, what about you? And if Edmonds is out, are you playing James Conner? Hope he can get another pair of touchdowns.
That's not that crazy. I mean, Connor's pretty cheap, and they don't have great running back depth, so I wouldn't expect someone else to get that workload. So I think that's pretty interesting. I think Trey Lance is a great play this week. It's nothing earth-shattering to say that, but he's cheap. He runs the ball a ton. His prop is like 40 yards running, so that would be one of the top 5 quarterbacks running. It's what we saw in college too, so no reason to doubt that. And he's been really effective in the limited number of throws he's made. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Deebo Samuel has been having a crazy breakout season. It'll be interesting with the quarterback change, how that affects Deebo, but he's definitely the guy to stack with.
All right, Chris, I'm good to go like two more minutes, right? For these pivots, fades, and top prop. Okay, cool. Just wanted to, I wasn't sure. I thought the next show was at 3 and say, okay, so we're good. And by the way, if you want to check out our ownership projections today and tomorrow, they are free over at awesemo.com, entirely free. NFL ownership projections are free if you want to follow along. All right, TJ, your top fade, and by fade, we don't mean you'll have none of them, but maybe you will. Top fade and top pivot of the week for week 5.
Top fades. I've talked about it all show. I'm just going to say Devontae and Henry together just because the two most expensive players at the highest ownership just get you a unique build. So not even because I think they have bad games, but I just love the way it changes your salary allocation. Top pivot of the week. I'll go with the game we haven't went to. Everybody's going to be on the offenses in Dallas and New York, the late game. I like playing the Dallas defense because if that game goes awry, you get all the leverage if they get a touchdown and the game slows down or the points get there because the defense is special team. So I really like Dallas defense. Maybe throw Zeke in a correlation with their defense if you want.
Love it. Alex, what do you say? Top fade, top pivot for week 5.
Well, it's always risky to fade the most popular guy of the week, but I have a feeling I'm going to be fading Henry.
Yes, let's go.
It's just the math doesn't support him being able to sustain this. He is a projection at 23 in our projections, which is very good. But at 9K, you need a lot more than that. So you're going to need going to need him to have another performance like last week. So I think in our boom bust tool, he's 29% owned, 17% optimal. So that screams fade to me. I think James Robinson's an interesting leverage pivot, but I don't mind just taking the field. Najee Harris is a guy that has a lot of positive leverage this week, and he's on the field all the time, 12% owned, so that is someone I'm going to be looking at.
I might go Fournette to Damian Harris in spots because I know that offensive line doesn't look good, but it doesn't mean they won't be able to run the ball at all against Houston. Houston is so bad offensively. Davis Mills is so bad that the Patriots might have the ball the entire game. And while they don't have as high a total, they do have a more concentrated offense in the sense that there's no Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown and all of that. So maybe a couple less targets for Damian Harris, but this could be a 20 carry, 120 yard, 2 touchdown game. It really wouldn't shock me given that they're huge road favorites here. So I'll go to Damian Harris down there over Leonard Fournette. TJ, favorite bet of the week. Close us out.
Favorite bet of the week. Trey Lance over 7.5 rushing tips on DraftKings. All he's going to do is run, I think. So I love that a lot.
Awesome. What about you, Alex?
I always like these random bets that are in our players prop tool. So check out the site, it's free. But one that's really standing out to me is Jameis Winston, 6.5 rushing yards, and I'm taking the over. He hasn't averaged less than 15 yards per game in the last 3 seasons he's been a starter. And so far this year, he's averaged 15 yards per game with 3.5 rushing attempts. So I think if he runs the ball twice, he should be able to get 6.5 yards. So I like those odds.
Love it. This has been great. As always, fellas. TJ, thanks for joining us again, man.
Thank you for having me.
Check TJ out. First of all, at TJ Hernandez on Twitter, director of DFS over at 4 for 4. Check that out as well. And his DFS MVP podcast with our own boy, Matt Savoca himself. Of course, Alex at Awesemo DFS. And you can check all his work out at awesemo.com, including that very free player props tool that is super helpful. I'm over at Lafayette_D. You'll catch me back here tomorrow on the 4-hour live stream leading up to lock for week 5. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you back here next time. Peace.